Well, it is an incredible honor. I'm just amazed at what wonderful people that I have as friends and family that came, and it just means so much to me to celebrate this special day with you. And
Let me switch.
and weren't they great? My daughter and her husband and they've done so much work. Linda especially has worked her tail off for this event, and Liz has helped a lot too, and I just want to really thank them and appreciate everything you've done.
You're worth it. Start your story and I'll do the pictures. What?
I was born in a sleepy little lumber town called Cottage Grove in Oregon. My parents were Harvey and Nola Shipp, and they already had 2 sons, Clover and Gail. I was the only daughter. My early years were spent in a small farming community, that's my father, called London, which used to be called London Springs, as it was known in the early 1900s for its mineral baths that were healing. That's what brought my mother's family there, as they heard it was a healing place and might help my mother, who was not in good health. My mother's grandfather opened a country store there, later adding on a gas station. It was a small town with just one church, the Church of Christ. My grandfather took over the store when my grandma's father became ill, and that's some of the family there. And my grandfather and grandmother bought land about 2 miles south of there to build a farm. First they built the barn and lived there, and then they built a 2-story farmhouse. My grandfather bought the first car in the community, a Model T Ford.
Wow.
He did not know how to drive, and he was only about 30 years old. He had to go to Portland to pick it up, which was 2 or 3 hours away. Where they showed him how to run it, he didn't even know how to drive. He had taken my mother and her sister with him, and on the way home he drove it into a ditch, and by the time backing out of it, scared the girls to death. He never was a very good driver. It means you really need to learn to drive when you're younger. Some of my fondest memories are when we lived on their farm. At different times growing up, my grandpa ran a small dairy farm and got up early and milked about 8 cows and separated the milk in a separator, and they bottled it and bottled the cream and sold the milk, cream, and butter to the neighborhood. My job was to hold the cow tails so they would not swish him in the face. We loved to go with Grandpa on his ride as he visited with each person he delivered milk to. He was a jolly soul. And he was an elder in the church and led the songs, and even got a hymn published called Joy, 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 There'll Be Joy Up in Heaven. So I come from an old Christian family. My grandma would wring the chickens' necks, and then she would fry chicken for Sunday dinner, and always invited people from church or family to eat, as my parents on their wedding day. She taught me how to cook. In each fall she dried and canned food for the winter. My brothers had to chop wood and help Grandpa in the barn. We 3 kids and our cousins loved to play in the barn and upstairs in the haymow. That's me with my 2 brothers when we were little at the beach. That's when I was about 5 or 6. We kids all had jobs to do. Mine was feeding the many chickens and gathering the eggs, helping Grandma in the garden and in the house. My brothers would cut wood and bring it in, and my older brother learned to plow behind a horse. We loved it when the plowing was done and we could ride on the back of the big white plow horse down to the river for them to get a good drink when our spring would run dry. So that was our horseback riding. My dad worked in the woods or the mines or in the town of Cottage Grove. We lived in Cottage Grove when I was in 1st grade. It was during the Great Depression. So my dad had to work away from home to find enough work to feed our family. My mother was still sickly, so I had to take care of her, cook standing on a wooden box, and wash dishes. My brothers would cut wood and build a fire in the cook stove, but they didn't help with much of anything else. We were often hungry. You know what it's like to feel real hungry? Well, during the Depression, we felt hungry many times. We had very little money. I was always glad when my dad got home from the various jobs that he could find wherever he could find work. When I first started school, that's about the age when I was there, I got some kind of fungus infection on my hands, and my mother had to wrap my fingers with gauze and put smelly black salve on them. No one would play with me but the doctor's daughter, because she was used to all kinds of stuff. The doctor had his office in my family. What a way to start school. But no one would play with me. I went to the 2nd and 3rd grade at the one-room school, country school in London. When I was 9, in 1939, my dad decided he wanted to go to Pepperdine College, which was located at that time on 79th and Vermont in LA, at Church of Christ College in Los Angeles. He wanted to study for the ministry, as he'd been preaching some on Sundays for small churches, and he wanted to become a full-time pastor. We took off in an old Dodge car and hauled an old trailer. We had blowouts of the car and the trailer tires. There was patch over patch. It took us a week to get from Oregon to Los Angeles. Would be about a day or day and a half drive now. We rented a small house about 4 blocks from Pepperdine College in Inglewood. Not in Inglewood, in Los Angeles. I said someday I'd like to go to college there, but I knew my folks could never afford it. In early 1941, my dad got an offer to preach at Hawthorne Church of Christ. We were there during World War II. It was scary, as we lived between 3 airplane factories, which could have been bombed at any time.
This is where scrap metal.
We had air raid drills at school and metal scrap drives. Metal was scarce then. A little girl and I carried a heavy bed spring to the metal beam. Metal was needed for everything for the war. I became interested in politics then, and I still am. I watched as Hitler started taking over. I listened to the radio. I heard President Roosevelt on the radio many times. That's during World War II. And I read newspapers, saw the movie Tone News on the matinee on Saturdays at the movie house. Everyone helped in some way. You've never seen such patriotism as when they were during World War II. I mean, people would just, everybody wanted to do their part. And the women worked in the factories, Rosie the Riveter they called them, because the men were all off at war. And they had to take care of that, take care of the homes. It was a hard time for everyone, but it was a very patriotic time because the country all pulled together. Norman Rockwell, the most famous illustrator in the world, heard Roosevelt's famous speech on our 4 freedoms, and he painted pictures of them. They were made into posters and sent all over the world, as they were symbolic of what we were fighting for. Freedom from want, freedom of fear, freedom of worship, and freedom of speech. To this day, I get a lump in my throat when the flag passes by, as it reminds me of how free we really are. In 1943, my dad got asked to preach at a church in North Sacramento. So I finished the 7th grade there and went to high school there. We had moved around so much that I had few friends, so I begged my parents to stay in one place long enough so I could go to all 4 years of high school at one school. My dad took a job at a plumbing supply place and just preached for small churches on Sundays so that they could stay in one place. And I was very grateful for that in one school finally. It afforded me a chance to get acquainted. I excelled at sports, and I was first string tennis, basketball, soccer, and baseball. I became president of the Girls Athletic Association and was on the student council. I was one of 4 outstanding seniors in our yearbook. It gave me a lot more self-confidence. I was always envious of the other girls in school that had pretty long hair and good clothes. I would say, someday I'm going to have pretty clothes. That's kind of my downfall, because I spend more on clothes than anything. I love to get and wear pretty clothes. After I graduated, I was able to get a scholarship to Pepperdine because my dad was a pastor, and I had decent grades. I was given a job in the art department to make posters for upcoming events. My brother taught me how to paint the letters. One day, the director of the art department said, "Norman Rockwell, the famous artist, is coming to campus to speak, so please paint a poster for that." I thought and thought, and what could I do for the famous Norman Rockwell? So I decided to do it like a Saturday Evening Post cover, and I put his picture on it, and copies of my poster were placed around campus. The night Norman Rockwell spoke, the art director asked my brother and I if we wanted to meet Rockwell. Sure, we said. We went up on the stage, and just then the school photographer came out with my poster and handed it to Rockwell to hold between him and the college president. The photographer looked at me and said, "Here's the young lady that painted this." And the most famous artist in the whole world asked, "May I have this painting, young lady?" I went, gulp. The most famous artist in the whole world wanted this little schoolgirl's painting? I said, "Well, yes, but will you send me something of yours?" Because I thought even a thumbnail sketch or something he did would be valuable. I still have those 4 freedoms today. They're out there on one of the tables. And he sent me a copy of the 4 freedoms to autograph them, but his signature doesn't show anymore. In the middle of my first year at Pepperdine, I met my first husband, Joe. His fraternity of Slower with him was having a weekend snow party, and Joe invited me to go with him. I went and we hit it off and then started dating, and that summer we got engaged. I knew my folks could not afford a wedding. We found out his fraternity was having another snow party in Big Bear that winter, so we decided to have a surprise wedding there. That's my husband, first husband, father of my kids. My folks came down and secretly brought a cake and some punch, and they usually had a church service on Sunday. And just when it ended, we went up and had our surprise wedding. We spent our honeymoon there at Big Bear. I dropped out of school that semester and went to work, and we had our first child, Joseph Jr., while Joe was finishing his college classes. Joe was so proud of this son, he brought friends home at the 10 a.m. chapel break to see his new son, just after I finally got this colicky baby to sleep. When Joe graduated from Pepperdine and we moved to Martinez and he got a job there, we lived with his mother for about 6 months. Our first home was a very small converted chicken house. When I was expecting my second child, Linda, we moved to a 2-bedroom house in Concord. We found out at Concord, that's east of Oakland. We found out about a deal that the government would help you build a house if you had a lot, so we bought a half-acre lot. We had to do some of the work for the down payment, like painting and digging the septic tank and line, and we ended up building another house on the other half of the lot and did the same thing there, so we had our first rental. When I found out I was pregnant with our third child, Ron, we moved to a 3-bedroom house in Concord. When Ron was 4, we moved to a larger house in Clayton. Linda loved to sing, and we would always ask her to sing for friends. She loved to sing, "Catch a falling star and put it in your pocket and never let it fade away." We should have had her sing it here today. My oldest son, Joey, loved to build things out of scraps of wood, and he became a building contractor when he was grown, and even built wineries and big, huge custom homes. And Ron was a very good artist, so he puts together plans for people when they want to do remodels. We encouraged them to work outside the home, so Linda babysat. Joey had a paper route, and Ron made a flyer to take around to people saying, "When you're gone, call Ron." And he'd sit there. House and take care of the pets and mow the lawn or whatever. He earned his first bicycle doing that. They each had different jobs as they got older. Joey joined the Marines when he was about 18. After boot camp, he was sent to Hunters Point, a military installation on the San Francisco Bay as an MP. He was supposed to go to Vietnam, and we don't know why, and he didn't know why, but his orders got changed at the last minute. Thankfully, because the artillery unit that he was in, the Marines there, was run over by the Viet Cong. He probably wouldn't have made it. God must have directed that change in his orders as the unit he trained with was sent to Vietnam. Joey was home about every weekend and would bring some buddies with him. They called me Mom, and I was glad we could offer them a place. Some years earlier, I had asked Joey to let me know when he got in, so even as a big stacking Marine, he still did that. He would come down the hall and say, "I'm home, Mom." That way I could go to sleep. One night, one of his big Marine friends stayed over after Joe had to get back to the base, and he used Joe's car to go to a friend's house. And when he got home about midnight, he came down the hall and said, "It's Jim, and I'm home, Mom." Ron joined the Air Force and spent time in Spain after he married a great gal, Cherry. Linda went away to college, where she met her first husband, Tim. Joey married a sweet Christian gal, Carla. Joey later became a Christian, then became an associate pastor in his church, and even sang on their small praise team. He was a successful contractor building custom homes. They had 2 sons. Ron and Cherry had 3 daughters and 1 son. Linda and her first husband, Tim, had 5 sons and 1 daughter. Linda later married Les, and they had 1 son together, Ray. And Ray is here today. And so are 2 of my nephews, one from Texas, of my brother's sons, and one from Newport Beach. All 3 of my kids are Christians and have been active in their churches. Joe and I divorced in '74, and then I married John and went to Arizona for 10 years. While I was there, I had the adventures of my life. I got involved in solar energy. I went to the Solar Energy Commission in Phoenix to get info on solar energy, as my husband John wanted to put solar on 40 acres that he had bought in Kingman. Shortly after, the solar commissioner called me and asked me if I would put a solar exhibit together for the state fair. I said, well, I don't know where I would get the material for that. So he sent me to a professor at ASU in Tempe, and he had some material, and he sent me to another one. Pretty soon I put together a 100-square-foot exhibit on solar energy. This was after the long gas lines, when gas was so scarce in '73 and '74. So people were very interested in solar energy. The booth was such a hit that they asked me to put the exhibit on in a state teachers fair a couple of weeks later. So I did, and then John and I moved to Kingman. Not long after that, he was transferred there with his job. When I got there, people asked me what I'd been doing, and when I said, well, something with solar energy, they asked me to put on a fair at the library and asked me to speak at their schools and clubs. And one of the county board asked me to put together a solar energy commission for Mojave County. Word got out, and I started getting invited to speak at solar energy conferences and seminars all over the country. I traveled all over the country speaking. I had never done public speaking in my life before that. At that time, Mojave County was the only county in the country with a solar energy commission. So I was asked then to head their new solar energy department. And then it was the only county in the country that had a solar energy department. So I got more invites. So I got the idea to build a minimum solar security facility for minimum security prisoners and make it all solar and energy efficient in the county there. So I drew up some simple plans, and an architect friend put it all to scale. It had a solar greenhouse on the south side for heat and for part of their food, and then an efficient wood stove and a windmill for part of the energy, and solar panels on the roof. That's one of the magazines that I did. After the solar energy department was closed because they didn't have enough money to pay for the department anymore, I started a solar energy magazine called Solar Greenhouse Digest. And then it became a magazine called Solar Living. Anyway, on this building that I applied for a government grant to pay for the workers and the cost of the building. I had to hire and oversee the workers, pay the help, and see that all costs got paid. Arizona Governor Babbitt heard about it and invited me down to his office and asked me to be on the Solar Energy Board and to be on another board to draw up building permits and procedures for energy building codes for all the building departments in the state. I was the only lady on the board. Most were architects or engineers, but I knew more about solar than they did. I even had a daily radio program. I was asked to run for state legislature when I was in Mojave County there, and I didn't think I was smart enough. Then the dean of the community college came to me and asked me to teach an accredited solar energy class at the college. I said, well, I only have an AA degree, but he said I knew more about it than anyone else in the county. There were no textbooks on solar at that time, so I had to make up the whole curriculum and tests and added on teaching in 2 other campuses. He asked me to teach in Bullhead City and Lake Havasu, 2 other college campuses. When the county budget tightened, solar was cut out, so I started this solar energy magazine called Solar Greenhouse Digest. And so I took that to conferences and had a booth and promoted my magazine. After we moved to Flagstaff, I was asked to write for the local paper, and I was asked to put on a solar fair at the county fairgrounds where over 5,000 people came out. The 3 networks from Phoenix came up and interviewed me, and I was on their TV that night. What I learned besides public speaking was how to do commercials, make up press releases, interviews, and how to put a publication together, how to be interviewed on TV, and much more. Then everything about solar seemed to dry up, so I got a job as marketing director for a regional mall in Flagstaff. After 2 years, I went into real estate. I still have a broker's license that Linda works under. When our 10-year marriage broke up, I moved to Phoenix and headed a sales team at the Biltmore Country Club LePage. Then I moved back to Northern California and met my 3rd husband, Lee, there. We did a lot of RVing across the country. That's when I went to every state. The last RV we had was a 41-footer towing a car, and I drove it the last trip the whole time. I planned the trips, acted as navigator, and drove a lot. Lee passed after we had been married for 23 years. So I moved down to Torrance to stay with Linda and Les, and I got lonely and met Bud on the singles website, and we fell in love almost immediately. We were married almost 10 years. He just passed in November, and I still miss him. He was a true Christian and a good man and the love of my life. He was very supportive about all that I did. I wrote my 2nd book about 4 years ago called Why Your Vote Matters. And I'm working on my 3rd book now, and it will be called The America That Was and America That Could Be Again. I walk down memory lane as I've seen so many changes in this country. In my spare time, I belong to 2 Republican clubs, and I'm on the board of one, and I teach senior Sunday school at my church in Longdale. I've gone back to the gym, something I've done since my kids were young. That's probably kept me young. I have 3 kids, 13 grandkids, 32 greats, and 2 great-greats. I'm blessed that Bud and me and Linda left we were on a cruise. I'm blessed with a big supportive family, and I have good health and agility, and I have lots of good friends. It's one of my paintings.
There you go.
Some of my paintings. Here's my 2 brothers before they passed.
And who's that? You can go ahead and narrate these. You can go ahead and tell us what's on there.
Well,
Joe and Ron and
that's Ron, my two sons, and Linda and two sons and Linda. And their father with the cane.
So these are gonna be some family pictures. You wanna just quickly say that's who that is?
That's Joe and Carla.
Joe's family.
Yeah.
There's our family.
Whose wedding was that?
Michaela's.
Michaela's,
Oldest
yeah.
granddaughter, great granddaughter, sorry. And, there's your, great greats. Great greats.
And Tom and Melissa, oldest grandson. And his family. He lives in Idaho.
Great greats. Sorry, this is what happens when you have big families. So fast.
That's Summer's family. My only granddaughter. No,
And
granddaughter from Linda's side. I mean. That's Bryson and Jacob. That's Jacob and Bryson. Jacob here.
and there's Dylan and his new
And that's for
brother.
the new grape.
Oops, sorry.
That's Josh is here too. That's he and his family. Oh, take it back. Can you take it back?
Yeah.
Early in his band.
There it goes.
Ray is here and he's got his own band. And that's him performing. The rock band.
There's Ron's family and you. That's you right there by Ron.
That's me with Ron's family, my son's family.
Oh, I have to, these are a couple of friends.
She's here?
Yes.
Judy, my adopted daughter, she's here.
This is your nephew.
I have an adopted grandson and an adopted daughter.
That's your 90th.
That's my 90th birthday.
And there's the 95th in Mammoth. We all went to Mammoth. There's Hughes. And there's Hughes. Come on, Don, we're gonna give you another microphone. Just that. And then you might want to introduce that.
It is our great honor to have today with us. That was at a